Hi everyone, welcome to the channel After All That Years.
At 62, you think you know what heartbreak looks like, but nothing prepares you for watching your wife pack her belongings while humming a tune you've never heard before. That morning started like any other Tuesday until Eleanor announced she was leaving me for something more fulfilling, her exact words delivered with the same casual tone she used to discuss grocery lists. "I've been thinking about this for months, Gerald," she said, folding her sweaters with methodical precision. "You're a good man, but I need passion in my life again. I need to feel truly alive before it's too late." The words hit me like a physical blow. 23 years of marriage, and she spoke about leaving as if she were changing television channels. No tears, no hesitation, just this matter-of-fact declaration that our life together had become insufficient. She zipped up her suitcase, gave me a brief kiss on the cheek, and walked out the front door without a backward glance. I stood in our bedroom doorway, watching the empty hangers sway in the closet, trying to comprehend what had just happened. The woman I'd built a life with, the person I'd shared dreams and disappointments with for over 2 decades, had simply decided I wasn't worth the effort anymore. She wanted excitement, adventure, something I apparently couldn't provide. For hours, I wandered through our house like a ghost, touching surfaces and objects that suddenly felt foreign. The kitchen table where we'd eaten thousands of meals together, the couch where we'd watched countless movies, the garden we'd planted together 3 springs ago. Everything looked the same, but the meaning had been stripped away. I was alone in a space that had once felt like home. That evening, my phone chimed with a text message from Elena. "Please don't hate me, I just have to follow my heart. You'll understand someday." Understand what, exactly? That 23 years meant nothing? That the life we'd carefully constructed was so easily disposable? I stared at those words until they blurred together, anger and confusion swirling in my chest. She expected me to simply accept this betrayal with grace and understanding. But something nagged at me. Eleanor's sudden transformation didn't make sense. She'd always been deliberate, careful about major decisions. This impulsive break for freedom felt completely out of character. My instincts told me there was more to this story than her need for self-discovery. Unable to sleep, I found myself at Elena's desk, opening her laptop, something I'd never done in all our years together. Trust had always been absolute between us, or so I'd believed. But desperate times call for desperate measures, and I needed answers. What I discovered shattered what remained of my world. Hidden in her email was a folder labeled Travel Plans, containing hotel reservations for a romantic weekend getaway. But these weren't solo reservations for soul-searching. They were for 2 people, Elena and someone named Connor Hendricks. The dates went back 4 months, showing a pattern of regular meetings at expensive hotels across 3 different cities. My hands trembled as I clicked through email after email, each one revealing another layer of deception. Their correspondence painted a picture of a passionate affair that had been developing for the better part of a year. Connor wrote about missing her beautiful laugh and how he couldn't wait to wake up next to her every morning. Eleanor responded with equal enthusiasm, discussing their future together and how free she felt when she was with him. The timeline made sickening sense now. Eleanor's sudden interest in yoga classes, her new wardrobe, the weekend conferences that seemed to pop up monthly, all of it had been carefully orchestrated lies to facilitate her double life. She hadn't left me for some abstract concept of fulfillment. She'd left me for another man. But the worst discovery was yet to come. Buried deeper in their correspondence was a conversation from just 2 weeks earlier. Connor: "Does he suspect anything yet?" Eleanor: "Gerald, not a chance. He's so trusting, it's almost sad. 23 years and he still believes everything I tell him." Connor: "Poor bastard, maybe we should put him out of his misery sooner rather than later." Elena: "Can you imagine his face? He'd probably just stand there and take it. He's never been one for confrontation." I closed the laptop and sat in the darkness, my entire sense of self crumbling. Not only had Elena betrayed our marriage, but she'd been laughing about my naivety with her lover. They saw me as pathetic, a fool too trusting to see what was happening right under my nose. The rage that consumed me wasn't the explosive kind you see in movies. It was cold, calculating, and utterly focused. Elena thought she knew me, thought I was some harmless old man who would simply accept his fate and fade away quietly. She was about to learn how wrong she was. I spent the rest of the night planning. If Elena wanted to play games, I was going to show her that some games have consequences she never considered. But first, I needed to see this betrayal with my own eyes. The next morning, I called my old army buddy Jake Peterson, who'd gone into private investigation after his service. "I need surveillance on my wife," I told him. "She's at the Harbor Bay Resort with another man." Jake didn't ask questions. 20 years of friendship meant he understood when I needed help, no questions asked. By afternoon, he'd sent me everything: photographs of Elena and Connor holding hands at the resort restaurant, kissing by the pool, entering their room together. The images confirmed what I already knew, but seeing them still felt like fresh wounds. Elena looked radiant in those photos, more alive than I'd seen her in years. She was animated, laughing, touching this man with a familiarity that spoke of intimate knowledge. It was clear this wasn't some casual fling. This was a woman deeply involved with someone who wasn't her husband. That evening, I made my decision. I was going to confront them, but not in the way they'd expect. Elena thought she was dealing with a passive man who would suffer in silence. Time to show her a different side of Gerald Matthews. I drove to the Harbor Bay Resort, my heart pounding, but my mind crystal clear. The luxury hotel was exactly the kind of place Elena had always loved. Expensive, exclusive, the sort of establishment that catered to people with secrets to hide. How fitting that it would be the stage for the unraveling of her carefully constructed lies. I found them in the hotel bar, tucked into an intimate corner booth like teenagers on a first date. Eleanor was wearing a red dress I'd never seen before, her hair styled differently, transformed into someone I barely recognized. Connor was younger than me by at least 10 years, handsome in that polished way that suggested money and easy living. They were so absorbed in each other that they never noticed me approach. I stood at their table for a full 10 seconds before Eleanor looked up and her face went completely white. "Hello, darling," I said calmly, pulling out a chair and sitting down uninvited. "Fancy meeting you here?" Connor looked confused, glancing between Eleanor and me. "Excuse me, do we know you?" I smiled at him with genuine warmth. "Not yet, but I know quite a bit about you, Connor. I'm Gerald, Elena's husband." The word husband hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Elena's mouth opened and closed wordlessly, while Connor's expression shifted from confusion to horrified understanding. "Gerald, what are you doing here?" Eleanor finally managed to whisper. I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table, the screen showing one of Jake's surveillance photos of them kissing by the pool. "I came to see what all the excitement was about. You said you needed passion in your life, and I wanted to understand what that looked like." Connor stared at the photo, his face draining of color. "Elena, you said you were divorced. Did she now?" I looked at Elena with genuine curiosity. "That's interesting, considering we're still very much married. Have been for 23 years, in fact." Eleanor grabbed my wrist across the table, her nails digging into my skin. "We need to talk, alone." I gently removed her hand from my arm. "Oh, we'll talk, Eleanor, but not here, not now. You see, I'm done playing by your rules. It's my turn to set the agenda." I stood up, straightened my jacket, and looked down at both of them. "Enjoy your evening. Something tells me it's going to be your last peaceful one for quite a while." As I walked away, I could hear Eleanor's frantic whispers behind me, but I didn't turn around. Let them panic. Let them wonder what I was planning. For the first time in months, I felt like I was the one in control. Back in my hotel room, I turned off my phone and sat in the darkness, planning my next moves. Eleanor had spent months orchestrating her betrayal, believing she could manipulate the situation to her advantage. She thought she was dealing with a predictable man who would simply accept whatever scraps of explanation she chose to offer. She was about to discover just how unpredictable Gerald Matthews could be. The phone calls started immediately when I turned my device back on the next morning. 17 missed calls from Elena, dozens of text messages ranging from panicked to pleading to angry. I read through them with detached interest, watching her emotional state deteriorate in real time. "Gerald, please answer. We need to talk. You don't understand the situation." "Let me explain. Stop being childish and pick up the phone. I'm coming home. We'll work this out." That last message made me laugh out loud. She was coming home to work things out. After months of lies, after planning her escape, after mocking me to her lover, she thought she could simply return and smooth things over with conversation. I typed a simple response. "Don't bother. You won't have access to the house." Within minutes, my phone rang. I answered on the fourth ring. What do you mean I won't have access? Eleanor's voice was shrill with panic. I mean exactly what I said. I've changed the locks, Eleanor. I've also frozen our joint accounts and contacted my lawyer. The divorce papers will be filed this afternoon. You can't do this, she shouted. Half of everything is mine. Actually, I said calmly, very little is yours anymore. You see, when I discovered your affair, I also found evidence of you using our joint funds to finance your romantic getaways. That's called dissipation of marital assets, and it doesn't look good in divorce proceedings. The silence on the other end was deafening. Eleanor was finally beginning to understand the gravity of her situation. Gerald, please, she said, her voice smaller now. We can work through this. People make mistakes. It doesn't have to end our marriage. Our marriage ended the moment you decided to share a bed with another man, I replied. I'm just making it official. But where am I supposed to go? All my things are in the house. That's no longer my concern. You should have thought about that before you decided to start a new life with Connor. I hung up and immediately called my lawyer to ensure everything was proceeding according to plan. Elena had made her choice, and now she would live with the consequences. But I wasn't finished yet. Elena's betrayal had been comprehensive, and my response needed to be equally thorough. She thought she could deceive me for months, drain our accounts, and walk away into a new life without any repercussions. She was about to learn how wrong she was. My next call was to Connor's workplace, a financial services firm where he worked as a senior advisor. A few discreet inquiries had revealed that his company had strict policies about personal conduct, particularly regarding extramarital affairs that might reflect poorly on their reputation. I didn't make any direct accusations. I simply sent an anonymous tip to their human resources department, along with copies of the hotel receipts and some of the more compromising photographs Jake had taken. Let them draw their own conclusions about whether Connor Hendricks was the kind of man they wanted representing their firm. The third part of my plan involved Eleanor's sister Janet, who had never approved of what she saw as Eleanor's materialistic tendencies. Janet had always been the more responsible sister, the one who valued family and commitment. A carefully worded phone call to her, along with copies of some of Elena's more callous emails about our marriage, ensured that Elena's family support system would be significantly less sympathetic than she expected. By the end of the day, I had systematically dismantled every aspect of the comfortable life Elena thought she could abandon without consequence. She had no access to our home, no access to our money, no job security for her lover, and no unconditional support from her family. The woman who had walked out so confidently just days before now found herself completely isolated. That evening, I received a call from an unknown number. "This is Connor Hendricks," the voice said, trying to sound authoritative, but failing to hide the underlying panic. "I don't know what you think you're accomplishing, but you need to stop this harassment immediately." "Harassment?" I replied with genuine surprise. "I haven't harassed anyone, Connor. I've simply shared some information with interested parties. Surely you're not ashamed of your relationship with Elena." "You destroyed my career," he said. "My company put me on administrative leave pending an investigation." "That's unfortunate," I said without sympathy, "but employment consequences are between you and your employer. I merely provided them with factual information about your conduct." "Elena had no idea you were this vindictive." "Elena had no idea about a lot of things," I replied. "For instance, she probably doesn't know that you're still married." The silence that followed was profound. "That's right, Connor. I did my research. Your divorce from Jennifer was never finalized. In fact, your wife has no idea you've been having an affair. Would you like me to share that information with Eleanor, or would you prefer to tell her yourself?" The line went dead. I smiled, knowing that Connor's carefully constructed lies were about to catch up with him, just as Elena's had caught up with her. 2 days later, Elena appeared at my office, the one place she knew I couldn't avoid her entirely. She looked haggard, her usual polished appearance replaced by obvious stress and sleepless nights. "5 minutes," she pleaded with my secretary. "Just give me 5 minutes with him." Against my better judgment, I agreed to see her. She sat across from my desk like a supplicant, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "You've destroyed everything," she said without preamble. "Connor won't return my calls. His company fired him. His wife found out about us and is filing for divorce. I have nowhere to go, no money, nothing." I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. "You seem surprised by this." "I never meant for things to go this far. I felt trapped in our marriage. I felt like I was dying inside. So you decided to kill our marriage instead? She flinched at my words. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Connor and I, we were going to be together. We had plans. Plans that apparently didn't include him being honest about his own marriage, I said. Tell me, Eleanor, did you really think you could build a future on a foundation of lies? Her composure cracked completely then, and she began to cry, deep, wrenching sobs that might have moved me once upon a time. Now they just sounded like the tears of someone finally facing the consequences of their choices. I know I hurt you, she said through her tears. I know I handled everything wrong, but we loved each other once. Doesn't that count for something? I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. Yes, we loved each other once. But you killed that love, Elena. You buried it under months of lies and betrayal and mockery. You can't resurrect something you've deliberately destroyed. So that's it. 23 years, and you're just going to throw it all away. I turned to face her. I'm not throwing anything away. You already did that when you chose Connor over our marriage. I'm simply refusing to pretend that what you destroyed can be repaired. She looked at me with something approaching desperation. What am I supposed to do now? What you should have done months ago, I said. Face the consequences of your choices like an adult. Elena left my office that day, and I never saw her again, except in the courthouse where our divorce was finalized. She tried to contest the settlement, claiming she deserved spousal support despite her infidelity, but the evidence of her affair and financial misconduct made her case impossible to argue. In the end, she walked away with minimal assets and no ongoing support. Connor, meanwhile, had lost his job, his wife, and his reputation. Their passionate affair had cost them everything they'd built in their respective lives, leaving them with nothing but each other. And even that relationship crumbled under the weight of mutual recrimination and financial stress. 6 months after Eleanor moved out, I ran into her former colleague Nancy at the grocery store. I heard Eleanor's been working as a receptionist at some small insurance office, Nancy told me, living in a studio apartment downtown. Connor moved back in with his mother after Jennifer took the house. I nodded politely but didn't ask for more details. Eleanor's current circumstances were no longer my concern. People often ask me if I feel guilty about how thoroughly I dismantled Elena's life. The honest answer is no. She made a choice to betray our marriage, to steal from our joint accounts, to mock me to her lover, and to plan her exit from our life together without any consideration for the damage she was causing. Every consequence she faced was a direct result of her own decisions. Did I love her once? Absolutely. Did that love obligate me to enable her betrayal or accept her treatment of me? Not for a moment. Eleanor wanted excitement and passion in her life. What she got instead was a harsh lesson about the difference between desire and reality. The man she thought she was leaving behind, the trusting, passive husband who would simply accept whatever she chose to do, never existed. I had simply chosen to be patient and kind within our marriage because I believed in the commitment we'd made to each other. When she broke that commitment, she freed me to respond without the constraints of marital loyalty. At 62, I discovered that I was perfectly capable of protecting myself and my interests when the situation demanded it. Elena's betrayal taught me that trust, once broken, cannot be restored through apologies or explanations. Some violations are too fundamental to forgive. I'm alone now, but I'm not lonely. I have my work, my friends, my hobbies, and my self-respect intact. Elena has her freedom, which is what she said she wanted. I hope she's learned to be more careful with other people's hearts in whatever relationships she pursues in the future. As for Connor, I suspect he learned that married women often come with complications that casual affairs don't prepare you for. Playing with other people's lives is a dangerous game, and sometimes the house always wins. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday, exactly 1 year after Eleanor had packed her bags and walked out of our house humming that unfamiliar tune. This time, I was the one who walked away, from the courthouse, from that chapter of my life, and into whatever comes next. Elena wanted passion and excitement. What she got instead was a masterclass in consequences. And I got my freedom back, along with a much clearer understanding of what I will and won't accept in any future relationship. Some lessons can only be learned the hard way. Eleanor learned hers, and so did I. 3 months had passed since the divorce became final when I received an unexpected call. The voice on the other end was familiar, but strained. "Gerald? It's Nancy from Eleanor's old office," I hope you don't mind me calling. I set down my morning coffee and settled into my chair. Not at all, Nancy. What can I do for you? It's about Elena, she said hesitantly. I know you two are divorced and everything, but I thought you should know. She's been asking around about you. My stomach tightened slightly. Asking what exactly? Whether you're seeing anyone, how you're doing financially, if you seem happy. She's been calling mutual friends, trying to get information. Yesterday, she asked me directly if I thought you'd be willing to talk to her. I closed my eyes and rubbed my forehead. Of course, Eleanor wasn't going to fade quietly into the background. A woman who had spent months orchestrating her exit from our marriage wasn't the type to simply accept defeat and move on. What did you tell her? I asked. That it wasn't my place to speak for you and that she should leave you alone. But Gerald, she seemed desperate, really desperate. I think her new life isn't working out the way she planned. After hanging up with Nancy, I found myself pacing my apartment, irritated that Elena was once again inserting herself into my peace of mind. I'd rebuilt my life carefully over the past year, establishing new routines and rediscovering interests I'd neglected during our marriage. The last thing I needed was Elena attempting to insinuate herself back into my world. But I should have known she wouldn't give up easily. Eleanor had always been persistent when she wanted something, and apparently what she wanted now was another chance at the life she'd thrown away. The first direct contact came 2 days later, a carefully written letter delivered to my apartment building. The handwriting was Eleanor's, but the tone was different from the angry or pleading messages she'd sent during our divorce proceedings. Dear Gerald, it began, I know I have no right to contact you after everything that happened, but I need you to know how deeply I regret my actions. I understand now that I made terrible choices that hurt you in ways I'm only beginning to comprehend. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I think about our good years together every day. If you're ever willing to talk, just to talk, I would welcome the chance to apologize properly. With sincere regret, Elena. I read the letter twice, then filed it away without responding. An apology a year later didn't erase 23 years of trust destroyed in a single moment. Elena was welcome to her regrets, but they weren't my responsibility to address. The letters continued arriving weekly, each one slightly more desperate than the last. Eleanor wrote about her current living situation, her job struggles, her loneliness. She reminisced about happier times in our marriage, specific moments and memories I'd nearly forgotten. She painted a picture of a woman who had made a catastrophic mistake and was now suffering the consequences alone. I wake up every morning knowing I destroyed the best thing in my life, she wrote in one letter. Connor and I lasted exactly 6 weeks after his divorce was finalized. We had nothing in common except our mutual selfishness. I gave up 23 years of real love for a fantasy that evaporated the moment it became reality. Despite myself, I found these letters affecting. Not because they changed my mind about reconciliation, that ship had sailed the moment Elena chose to betray our marriage, but because they forced me to confront the reality of what we'd both lost. Elena's pain was self-inflicted, but it was still pain. Her regret was too little and too late, but it was still regret. The breaking point came when Elena showed up at my apartment building on a rainy Thursday evening. The doorman called up to announce her presence, and I found myself staring at the intercom for a full minute before responding. Tell her I'm not available, I finally said. She says she'll wait, the doorman replied. She's been out here for about an hour already. I looked out my window and saw Eleanor standing under the building's awning, soaked despite her umbrella, looking up at my floor with an expression of desperate hope. The sight of her standing there in the rain, clearly having planned this dramatic gesture, irritated me more than any of her letters had. I grabbed my jacket and went downstairs to end this once and for all. Elena's face lit up when she saw me emerge from the elevator, hope flooding her features in a way that immediately made me regret coming down. Gerald, thank you for— Stop, I said, holding up my hand. We're not doing this here, and we're not doing this now. You want to talk? Fine. But not like this. Not with some theatrical performance in the rain. She nodded eagerly. Anywhere you want. Anytime you want. I just need you to listen. Against my better judgment, I suggested a coffee shop 2 blocks away. Eleanor fell into step beside me, and for a moment it felt disturbingly familiar, like thousands of other walks we'd taken together during our marriage. I had to consciously remind myself that the woman next to me was the same person who had betrayed every promise she'd ever made to me. The coffee shop was nearly empty. just a few students with laptops and an elderly man reading the newspaper. Eleanor and I sat across from each other at a small table by the window, the awkwardness palpable. She looked older than I remembered, worn down by whatever experiences she'd had since our divorce. "You look good," she said, studying my face. "Different, but good." "What do you want, Elena?" I asked, cutting straight to the point. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup like she was trying to warm herself. "I want to apologize, really apologize, not just in a letter. I want you to understand that I know what I did was unforgivable." "You're right," I said. "It was unforgivable. So if you know that, why are we here?" Her composure wavered slightly. "Because I can't accept that 23 years means nothing. Because I can't believe that what we had can just disappear completely." "It didn't disappear, Elena. You destroyed it. Deliberately and systematically. You planned your exit for months while lying to my face every single day. You stole from our joint accounts to finance your affair. You mocked me to your lover. You didn't just break our marriage, you demolished it." Tears began to form in her eyes. I know all of that. But people make mistakes, Gerald. Terrible, horrible mistakes. Doesn't everyone deserve a second chance?" I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. Some mistakes are too big for second chances. Some choices have permanent consequences. You didn't slip and fall into bed with Connor, Eleanor. You pursued him for months. You planned every hotel reservation, every lie, every moment of our marriage that you chose to destroy. "But I ended it," she said desperately. "The moment you confronted us, I knew I'd made the worst mistake of my life. Connor and we were finished immediately. Doesn't that count for something? You ended it because you got caught, not because you realized it was wrong. There's a difference." Eleanor stared into her coffee cup for a long moment. When she looked up, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "What if I told you I'd do anything to make this right? Anything at all?" "I'd tell you that some things can't be made right," I replied. "Trust, once broken, can't be repaired with good intentions or promises or even genuine regret. You can't unspeak the words you said about me to Connor. You can't undo the choices you made every single day for months. You can't make me forget what it felt like to discover that the woman I'd loved for 23 years thought I was pathetic." She flinched as if I'd struck her. "I never thought you were pathetic. Your emails say otherwise." "I was showing off for him," she said quietly, trying to sound sophisticated and worldly. "I didn't mean any of it. But you wrote it. You sent it. You laughed about my naivety with your lover. Whether you meant it or not, that's what you chose to do." Eleanor began crying in earnest then, her shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. Several other patrons glanced our way, but I didn't feel any urge to comfort her. These were tears she should have shed months ago, before she made the choices that led us to this moment. "I miss you," she whispered. "I miss us. I miss the life we had together." "So do I admitted, but missing something doesn't mean you can get it back. You chose to trade our life for something you thought would be better. The fact that it didn't work out doesn't mean you get to return to what you left behind." "So that's it?" she asked, wiping her eyes with a tissue. "You'll never forgive me? Never consider trying again?" I looked at this woman who had once been the center of my world, now reduced to begging for a second chance she'd forfeited through her own choices. Part of me felt genuine sadness for what we'd both lost, but a larger part of me felt nothing but the cold clarity of self-preservation. "Eleanor, I don't hate you," I said carefully. "I don't wish you harm. But I will never trust you again, and without trust, there's nothing to build on. You killed our marriage as surely as if you'd put a gun to its head. The woman I loved for 23 years doesn't exist anymore. Maybe she never did. You can't resurrect someone who's already dead." Eleanor stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the exact instant when she finally understood that this conversation wasn't the beginning of reconciliation. It was the end of any possibility between us. "I suppose I deserved that," she said quietly. "You deserve to move on with your life," I replied. "And so do I. But we're going to do that separately." I stood up to leave, then paused and looked down at her one last time. "Stop writing the letters, Elena. Stop asking about me through mutual friends. Stop showing up at my building. It's over, and continuing to pursue this is only making it harder for both of us to heal." She nodded without looking up. "I understand." I walked out of that coffee shop and never saw Elena again. The letters stopped coming, the phone calls through intermediaries ended, and my life returned to the peaceful routine I'd established in her absence. 6 months later, I heard through the grapevine that Elena had moved to another state, taken a job with a non-profit organization, and was apparently trying to rebuild her life from scratch. I hoped that was true. Despite everything that had happened between us, I wanted her to find some measure of peace and happiness, just not with me. People sometimes ask if I regret being so unforgiving, if I ever consider whether Eleanor's remorse was genuine enough to warrant a second chance. The answer is always the same. Some betrayals are too fundamental to survive. Elena didn't just cheat on me, she systematically deceived me while mocking my trust to her lover. She planned her exit from our marriage while pretending to be committed to our future together. Those aren't mistakes born of passion or temporary poor judgment. They represent a fundamental character failure that no amount of regret can erase. Eleanor became someone I didn't recognize, someone capable of cruelty I never imagined she possessed. Even if her remorse was genuine, I couldn't risk my emotional well-being on the hope that she might have truly changed. At 63, I've learned that forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. I can forgive Elena for my own peace of mind, while still maintaining the boundaries necessary to protect myself from further harm. Some bridges, once burned, should stay burned. Elena got the excitement she was looking for, and I got the clarity I needed. We both learned valuable lessons about the difference between fantasy and reality, between desire and wisdom. The cost was 23 years of shared history, but perhaps that was a price we both needed to pay to discover who we really were when the pretense was stripped away. I'm genuinely happy now in a way I wasn't for the last several years of our marriage. I have my independence, my self-respect, and a much clearer understanding of what I will and won't accept in my relationships going forward. Eleanor's betrayal, devastating as it was, ultimately freed me from a marriage that had stopped working long before either of us was willing to admit it. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be exactly what you needed, even if you couldn't see it at the time. Elena's affair ended our marriage, but it also gave me back my life. For that, in a strange way, I'm almost grateful.